All right, looks like we are live. Welcome to Standing for Truth. I am your host, Donnie, and I will be moderating tonight's important debate between TRock and Luca Medugno. Gentlemen, thank you both for being here for tonight's important debate.
So, nice to be here. You know me all. I work as a teacher and I'm an atheist. And I was here for some debates, I think. And a new thing, I did open my YouTube channel. It's like nothing because 8 subscribers, but if you want to have some previews to my debates, it's there.
Well, that's awesome to hear, Luca. You send me that link in the description box under your name. I've got some of your
Right away.
previous debates, and I can add your YouTube channel link. You've had a ton of debates already, and a ton of awesome debates as well. So I'm sure you've got a good amount of content that you can upload on your channel, Luca.
Yes.
So the question and topic for tonight is genetic entropy a legitimate problem for evolutionary theory? So, genetic entropy being a concept elaborated in great detail in this book, Genetic Entropy by Dr. John Sanford. So, one of my favorite topics for sure, which is why, as host and moderator of tonight's debate, I am really looking forward to hosting this engaging debate between TRock and Luca. Both TRock and Luca are no strangers to debates. They've been here many times. They've had a solid amount of debates on a variety of topics: age of the Earth, global flood, evolution. So for more from TRock and Luca, please check the description box where I do have some of their previous debates listed for people to check out. Okay, TRock, why don't we hand it over to you for an introduction as well? You know, who you are, a little bit about yourself. TRock, thanks for being here.
Thanks. Is my audio still coming in good?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, sounds great.
Okay, good deal. Yeah, I am, of course, represent the young Earth creationist perspective. I am not here to win a debate. I'm here to encourage those who believe to hold fast to what you believe and invite folks like Mr. Luca to also join believers and believing in Jesus as the Son of God and the Bible as the inspired Word of God. But my background is mechanical engineering and manufacturing. And so I'm going to try and use what I know from that background and apply it to this particular topic and origins in general. So that's it.
All right. Thank you so much for that introduction, TRock. Luca Medugno, we got an intro from you as well. For the audience sake, I do want to go over the format for tonight's debate on genetic entropy real quick before we get into the opening statement. So we're going to be having 12 minutes opening statements, followed by 8-minute uninterrupted rebuttals. Then we're going to have an open discussion where the debaters, TRock and Luca, are discussing the points and topics brought up during the openings and rebuttals. Then we're going to have a 5-minute concluding statement. And then this is where we get you guys in the audience involved. We're going to have an audience Q&A, roughly 30 minutes. So please make sure you are tagging me with your questions at Standing for Truth, and that way I won't miss them. So again, tonight we are debating the question and the topic: is genetic entropy a legitimate problem for evolution? So TRock being in the affirmative tonight, TRock would say yes to this thesis, and Luca would say no. So TRock, we're going to hand it over to you and let us kick off the opening statements. Whenever you're ready. Floor is yours.
Okay, Donnie, I'm going to share my screen.
Looks good. Looks good, TRock.
Okay, just a friendly reminder, thou shalt not take the name of the Lord thy God in vain. If evolutionists used good arguments, they would be creationists. Now, that's not a knock on evolutionists per se. It's just that the position itself is completely unreasonable. Okay, I want to start out with an introduction to the definition of entropy. I've given a layman's definition. We tend to kind of simplify things, and rightfully so. Tendency toward disorder or an increase in disorder. And the Oxford definition is a thermodynamic quantity representing the unavailability of a system's thermal energy for conversion into mechanical work, often interpreted as the degree of disorder or randomness in the system. So you can see that the Oxford definition actually is in agreement, at least to some extent, with the layman definition. One key element is the unavailability of a system's thermal energy for conversion into mechanical work. That will probably be an issue as the discussion progresses. So, equations for entropy. For irreversible processes, delta S is equal to negative H over T. H is enthalpy, which is the total energy change in the system. T is absolute temperature in Kelvin. For reversible processes, entropy is the Boltzmann constant, which is given here as 1.380649 times 10 to the negative 23rd, blah, blah, blah. Those units are actually joules, and ln is the natural logarithm, and the omega symbol there is the number of microscopic configurations. That's also going to be important here in a minute. Okay, so how to calculate entropy. In an isothermal process is one where the temperature does not change. The change in entropy, delta S, is the change in heat, Q, which is the equivalent of H in the previous form, divided by the absolute temperature, T. Okay, so in any reversible thermodynamic process, it can be represented in calculus as the integral from a process's initial state to its final state of dq over T. In a more general sense, entropy is a measure of probability and the molecular disorder of a macroscopic system. I'm going to back up for just a minute to the original definition, talking about an increase in disorder or a tendency toward disorder. One of the things we're going to discover is this idea of order is highly subjective. And that'll come out later in the discussion. But in a system that can be described by variables, those variables may assume a certain number of configurations. If each configuration is equally probable, that's very important. Then the entropy is the natural logarithm of the number of configurations multiplied by Boltzmann's constant, where S is entropy, KB is Boltzmann's constant, N is the natural logarithm, and W represents the number of possible states. Boltzmann's constant, of course, that was already given in the previous slide. So, entropy and the second law of thermodynamics. Now, this particular source is from a website called thoughtco.com. You can see the reference there. He says, one way of stating the second law of thermodynamics is as follows. In any closed system, the entropy of the system will either remain constant or increase. Okay. Key point there is closed system. You can view this as follows. Adding heat to a system causes the molecules and atoms to speed up. It may be possible, though tricky, to reverse the process in a closed system without drawing any energy from or releasing energy somewhere else to reach the initial state. You can never get the entire system less energetic than when it started. Again, we're talking about closed systems. The energy doesn't have any place to go. For irreversible processes, the combined entropy of the system and its environment always increases. Extremely important. Okay. Misconceptions about entropy. This is a continuation of the same page on that same website that I was just reading. This view of the second law of thermodynamics is very popular and it has been misused. Some argue that the second law of thermodynamics means that a system can never become more orderly. Again, there's that very subjective idea of what order is. This is untrue. It just means that to become more orderly, for entropy to decrease, you must transfer energy from somewhere outside the system, such as when a pregnant woman draws energy from food to cause the fertilized egg to form into a baby. This is completely in line with the second law's provisions. Now, conceptually, I would totally agree with that statement because everything is in agreement with the second law of thermodynamics. Entropy is also known as disorder, chaos, and randomness, though all three synonyms are imprecise. I will suggest that they're mainly imprecise because people that live in the theoretical world come up with all kinds of theoretical, not a good word, maybe hypothetical situations where maybe this can happen and maybe that can happen. But what we're going to do is look at the practical world, how things actually operate. So here I'm kind of going back and reviewing in the purple, fertilized egg to form into a baby, except look at the equation for entropy in an open system. Delta S is negative H over T, where H is the total energy. So, which implies that growth and development increase entropy because the total energy decreases with mass. But up there, he's kind of suggesting that entropy is kind of worked around by putting energy back into the system, but it's actually putting energy into the system, increasing the mass of the baby, increases the total energy of the system, and increases the entropy. It does not lower it, and it does not keep it constant, either one. Okay, biological systems are irreversible processes. And so we're using delta S equals negative H over T. And the examples of irreversible processes are self-evident: embryonic development, growth, aging, disease, dysfunction, death, that sort of thing. Someone might argue that disease and dysfunction are reversible, but the condition itself is. However, the total effect on the system is not. Open or closed system. Biological systems are always open systems. Of course, that's a common thing to claim from the evolutionary camp, is that because they're open systems, they can receive energy from outside and thereby suppress the effects of entropy over time. I'm going to suggest that's extremely misleading, and we'll see why in a minute. Subject to sunlight, food supply, water, radiation, electromagnetic energy, heat. For most things, food supply and water are good. The rest of them have a tendency to be bad. Plants are the one exception, of course, that benefit from directly from sunlight. You can certainly say that other types of organisms that are not plants can benefit from sunlight. True, but they have a much lower tolerance for it. Okay. Biological systems are always open. The more open a system is, the more likely entropy will increase, and to a greater degree. Efficiency of a system. Now, you're going to see some strange conundrums here about trying to calculate entropy using classical mechanics and thermodynamics, because biological systems are highly efficient. Mammal body temperatures typically range from mid-90s to 100 or so. So delta T is about 311 minus 308, which equals 3 degrees Kelvin. ATP synthase is around 98.5 to 99% efficient. And so Lubert Stryer says the enzyme appears to operate near 100% efficiency. Okay, the problem with less than 100% efficiency, heat is always lost and not used for work or to keep entropy constant. It's just lost. How is the efficiency of a heat engine related to entropy produced during the process? The maximum efficiency for any heat engine operating between two temperatures, TH, which is the hot side, and TC, which is the cold side, is the Carnot efficiency given by efficiency equals 1 minus TC over TH. But if you try and use humans as an example, you run into an obvious problem here. 98.6 divided by 101, 1 minus that, it looks like we're 2.38% efficient, which is obviously absurd. Now, maybe the key here, and I assure you, I realize that biological systems are not considered in the same light as mechanical systems, heat engines, that sort of thing. Nevertheless, the unit of energy for biological function is the calorie, which is a unit of heat. So part of what this points to is, outside of these equations, there are not any really good equations that describe biological entropy as a machine. So this works fine if you're talking about a heat exchanger, but it does not work at all, obviously, if you're talking about biological systems. In other words, this is kind of important. In other words, maximum efficiency is obtained hypothetically by maximum difference in temperature between the cold side and the hot side of the heat engine. But biological systems are notoriously constant in their temperature, or very low delta T, I'll put it that way. Bullet points. So with that, molecular binding, molecules have many weak hydrogen bonds. Mutations accumulate over time. And there is a strong tendency for the A peptides to translate to G, and for C to translate to T. That is the chemical tendency of DNA. Now I'm just kind of throwing some stuff out here. I think I need to move on. So one of the points that I want to make about mutation accumulation here is that several current COVID-19 treatments now employ pharmaceuticals that accelerate RNA mutation rates, which is essentially accelerated genetic entropy. This whole response was something that Dr. John Sanford wrote to an objection about mutations and beneficial versus deleterious, that kind of thing. But the key point here for us is that accelerating mutation rates is a way to actually take something like a pandemic and make it less effective. So symptoms of biological entropy in the natural world. These are just symptoms. I'm not trying to pass them off as proofs or anything else, but there are symptoms that you need to look for. The total number of extinct species far outnumber the total number of current living species. For every system or organ in any animal body, there exist one or more diseases or dysfunctions for it. There's a huge database of diseases and genetic disorders, many of which have a specific mutations associated with them. That number is conservatively in excess of 10,000. Genetic disorders, diseases, dysfunctions, that sort of thing. There is no such database of beneficial mutations for biological systems or organs. In many animals that have large litters, there is often a runt in the litter, or otherwise fitness compromised offspring.
1 minute.
Thank you. Again, just a symptom, not trying to use it as a proof text of any kind, just a symptom. The number of mutations from generation to generation always increases, and this part is really, really key. It's about the rates of accumulation. Okay, so to show that genetic entropy is not a threat or a problem to evolution, evolutionists must demonstrate that offspring can have equal to or less than the number of mutations that the parents have. And so I will yield my time with that.
All right. Thank you, TRock, for that opening statement and the visuals. That was 13 minutes. So to be fair, we're going to give Luca up to 13 minutes as well. Anytime not used, of course, we will throw into the discussion portion. So, Luca, we're going to hand it over to you for your opening statement.
Yes, I will. Okay. Slides. Give me a moment. Okay. Okay.
As you're getting those slides up, Luca, I will remind the audience to please make sure you're tagging me with your questions. Again, the topic and question we are debating tonight is genetic entropy a legitimate problem for evolution? So tag me with your questions, and as always, we'll have a solid audience Q&A. Luca, your presentation is up. You're good to go.
Okay. So, is genetic entropy a legitimate problem for evolutionary theory? This is my presentation, of course. And yes, my answer is no. But let me explain. So, what we are talking about here, I quote John Sanford himself. So this is the definition given by the author. So genetic degeneration of living things and a systematic breakdown of biological information. Okay, so this is the definition, but it's true. We are degenerating. Let's find out. So why should be genetic entropy a problem? Here you can see the view of the author. So I've read, of course, his material, and it's his stuff about that. So basically, he thinks that mutation will, in due time, reach that point where our genome or any other will no longer be able to mutate, because it will be full of harmful mutation. And one of the key problem in his view is the lack of new genetic material to mutate. So what we can see about genetic entropy. Here I will show you something very strange. Italy, it's a very old country, and these kind of things have some advantage, let's say that. So here you can see two structure. The one on the left, it's a very ancient structure, partially destroyed. I think it dates back to the medieval period, and it's very close to my house. And here you can see a very wonderful castle. It's quite far from my house. It's in Aosta, a very northern city of Italy. Why I'm showing you these structures? So here you can see me on the side of the door. It's not a problem of perspective. The door it's very, very small. And you can see inside the castle, the Phoenix Castle is one of the most preserved castle in my country. You can see the doors leading to the battlements, and they are small. I cannot post a photo with me in it because you cannot reach those areas of the castle. It's quite dangerous to do so, but I can assure you that they are quite small. I think 1.5 meters tall. Why those doors are so small? So let's talk about average age during history. So, there is a okay, there is a error there. Sorry, but if we are degenerating, we will expect us to lose fitness and to degenerate during time. But it's not what we see. So here you can see the age of the average male during history. As you can see, for the most part, the age of people are increased, and there were times where it was not increasing but decreasing. But for the most part, we are taller than our ancestors. So if, and here you can see the same graph for women. If we can just generate, why you can see those kind of graphs? It does not make any sense in Stanford theory. So let's talk about some kind of mutation that can lead to an increase of material. So here you can see duplication. What are duplication? I'm quoting from Wikipedia, so you can look it up. It's basically a mutation where you duplicate a part of the genome. It can be small or bigger, depends on the mutation. I do admit that for the most part are harmful, this mutation, but not every time, and also depends on the organism. In plants, you can see more of this mutation without very grave danger for the plant. In fact, it's quite common to have duplication sometime of entire genomes. So that's that. But we need to remember that it does not matter how much rare is a mutation if can be selected. If mutation is very positive for the organism, will be selected, no matter how much rare it is. So here you can see another way to add material to our genome or in genome of any other organism. So this bacteria is inserting part of its genome on plants. And it's curious to know that that's the base for GMOs. It's how we made it. So this kind of process, of course, the most famous one are from RNA and things like that, but some bacteria can do too, and other transposon too. We can have this insertion in DNA. Of course, most of them are harmful, but when you have a mutation on this strand, you can have a very positive mutation. And we have evidence for that, like the sweet potato plant. So these kind of things, in my humble opinion, falsified Sanford assumption, because if you have means to add material, his premise fails. So conclusion, by Sanford, sorry, that's a mistake. Genetic entropy would require a steady decline in fitness in all living things. I've found in his paper that he does expect 1 to 5% loss for generation. It's not something we see, not at all. We are talking about 4 to 20% in only 4 generations. To be put in context, I've seen during my life 4 generations, and I never seen that drop in fitness. So I'm open to being proven wrong, but until then, I will dismiss the hypothesis of genetic entropy. Here you can see my bibliography for this presentation. You can find it on my channel too. And thanks for watching. For any question, as usual, you can write me a mail. That's my mail, and that's my YouTube channel. Yes, I do have only 8 subscribers. It's very small, but it's there. If you want to leave a comment or anything, it's there. I can stop there.
Well, thank you very much, Luca. That was 10 minutes right on the dot. So, Luca, TRock, fantastic job with your opening statements. Very clear, concise, and I do appreciate the slideshow presentations and the visuals. So we're now moving into the...
I want to apologize for the mistake in the slides. I do not know how it was possible. I did check for the debate, but sorry.
Luca, no worries. It happens to the best of us. No worries about that. So thank you again, Luca. And we're now moving into the 8-minute uninterrupted rebuttals. So we're going to hand it back to TRock. TRock, whenever you're ready, you've got 8 minutes. And once you gentlemen hit the 7-minute mark, I'll give you a 1-minute warning. And that way you'll know to kind of start winding things down. So whenever you're ready, TRock, floor is yours.
Oh. Okay. Alrighty. Now I apologize. I was sitting there looking at one of Luca's references there. So, okay. Quick rebuttal of Luca's presentation. He gave a quote by Sanford, to which I agree. There's nothing to refute there. The Finney's Castle. He said fitness increased during certain periods of time. He said, if we are losing fitness, how would this even be possible? That is it's just a logical blunder in what's actually happening in the background. He gave a graph, showed basically some periods of time where lifespans and height and whatnot increased. The problem with that is it's the cause and effect. That is not a result of any genetic changes whatsoever. Zero. What it is, it's the product of war, disease, personal habits, that sort of thing. So, Luca, if you put the gun down, if you quit touching dead animals that are contaminated with deadly viruses, if you don't do like they did during the Industrial Revolution, where they huddled up in tightly knit groups and then threw their sewage out, literally threw it out the window into the streets, you get, when you quit doing those things, you get an instantaneous effect that has nothing whatsoever to do with genetics or reproduction or anything else. Your health increases because you're not killing each other and you're not subjecting yourself to deadly viruses and that sort of thing. It has nothing whatsoever to do with natural selection or mutation accumulation or anything else. Sanford, if you actually read Sanford's responses to some of the critics, they essentially tried to make the same argument, and he pointed this out. It's just a logical blunder. Gene duplication causes illness in humans and other animals. I'm not sure exactly what he thought he was doing to support the idea of not genetic entropy there, because it pretty much just said it. Gene duplication actually can be quite lethal. And in some cases, entire genome duplication. So the one that comes to mind is, and not lethal necessarily, but it kind of points a different direction, still not pertaining to not genetic entropy happening, and that is stasis. But the example was the marbled crayfish that duplicated its entire genome. Did its fitness level increase? That's a highly subjective idea, but at the end of the day, it looked a lot more like stasis than it did like some kind of bizarre new beneficial mutation that was overcoming the accumulation of deleterious mutations. And then, of course, he invoked natural selection. Now, he did not go to great lengths to explain how it is that natural selection is going to do this. Nevertheless, this actually is kind of the center of the debate for most people, including the professional biologist and geneticist in the evolutionary camp. They firmly believe that natural selection can somehow right the wrong that accumulating mutations do. What we're going to find out, though, as the discussion progresses, is that, probably surprising to some people, natural selection has very, very little to do with speciation or control of deleterious mutations, either one. I'll explain that later. I don't have a whole lot of time to get into that, but mainly because I don't have time, and Luca did not give an in-depth reason for how natural selection was going to do this, but I'll come back to that. Different ways to alter DNA, mutagenesis, viral elements, and so forth. Absolutely, there are ways to alter DNA. However, that would have to be the rule, not the exception, that you were constantly altering DNA. But the entire premise of evolution is that you just inherit what came before you and alter it a little bit at a time in a very slow, gradual process. Mutagenesis is actually a very rapid process. Viral elements, that sort of thing, even by evolutionary standards, those are rapid processes, not slow and gradual, that would somehow demonstrate that over long periods of time, not genetic entropy was happening, but natural selection was somehow mitigating the effects of it. So he also said by Stanford's admission, genetic entropy would require a steady decline in fitness in all living things, 1 to 5% loss. I don't believe that's actually Stanford's position. Now, I actually did pull up a quote here trying to find where he got that from. I'm not sure I found the particular one I was referring to, but actually what Stanford said was he thought those numbers, particularly that 5% number, was really high. He thought that it was much lower than that. So Luca's extrapolation of 4 generations and 4 to 20% decrease in fitness is not at all what Stanford was trying to convey in his work. So I'm going to stop there, since that's kind of where Luca stopped his presentation.
All right. Thank you, TRock. That was about 5.5 minutes. So a couple more minutes there that we can throw into the open discussion. So thank you so much for that rebuttal, TRock. We're now going to hand it over to Luca. And again, reminder to the chat, please make sure you're tagging me with your questions related to the topic of tonight's debate, genetic entropy. Luca, whenever you're ready, you've got 8 minutes, up to 8 minutes, of course.
So my response is, first of all, the age of humans, the average age, is indeed caused by genetics, because if you look at me, I'm 1.7 meters tall, and I can eat whatever I want. I will not grow any further. Not innate, at least. Maybe in other direction, but not innate. So yeah, it's indeed genetics, and our I cannot say fitness, because when you have very little to eat, like in some areas of Italy during the Roman period, or in the first period of Middle Ages, a short man will live more easily, because he does need to eat less. But that's natural selection. If you are too tall, you will have more hard time to find enough food for you, because if you are 2 meters tall, you will need a lot of food. If you are 1.5 meters tall, you will need less, and so you will survive better. And that's natural selection. Someone in the chat was asking for the data. You can find in the paper. So yeah, that's increase in, I cannot say in fitness, because it depends. Fitness depends on the situation. But for genetic entropy, if you can become bigger and stronger, that makes no sense. For Stanford and the number on lose in fitness, I taken from the latest news on his website. Yes, it was not his point, was a point of another person, but was on his website and was brought up by him. So I did take that into account. Even if it's lower, I've seen a quote by Stanford telling that it's indeed slower. It will be is needed to be measurable, to be demonstrated, and I cannot see that. I am a teacher, as most of you know, and I work with young ones, and they are not less fit than me at their age. If less, they are more fit than me. Back in my day, I can recall a little girl that is taller than his teacher at 10 years old. So yeah, new generation are growing quite good, if you ask me. And also, I did this year some courses on how to interact with very intelligent children with very high QI. So yeah, I cannot see the degeneration of the hypothesis of Sanford. And if we can observe it, I need some data to accept it, and I cannot. And I state it again. If you go in medieval Burg, you will see a lot of these structures made obviously for smaller humans. They were smaller, it's a fact. So how can you explain it with genetic entropy? Because if you are becoming taller and stronger, it does not fit the hypothesis at all. In the medieval period, I would figure out like a very tall man. Right now, I'm just average. So yeah, those are my points. I want to enter into the discussion because I want to say things or two about entropy, because it's kind of my thing. So I can leave the rest of the time for the discussion.
All right, equally timed rebuttals. That was 5 minutes, 5.5 minutes for the both of you. So that concludes the opening statements and the rebuttals. So thank you so much, TRock and Luca. Great technical debate so far. Lots of interesting points for us to discuss. I'll give you both a 1 minute break to kind of gather your thoughts, gather your points that you are going to want to discuss in the open discussion. And during this minute break, I will go over the fact that we got another debate marathon coming up. So this debate, of course, on genetic entropy. And then this Thursday, this will be more of an open mic debate. So we're going to be discussing eschatology, post-tribulation rapture, pre-tribulation rapture. Kent will be here, and he'll be opening up with a presentation, and then we'll have a discussion. I'll make sure the link is posted. Anybody that wants to join and ask questions, have objections, we're going to have fun. We're going to limit this to about 2 hours, so we'll get in as much discussion as we can. Then the next day, we've got the King James only controversy debate. Is the KJV the only accurate English translation? Eddie from the Brute Facts podcast and Nick Sayers, both fantastic debaters, and both well studied and educated on this topic. So that should be fun. Then we got a good mix. You know, we got eschatology, the next day Bible translation debate. Then we've got a debate on soteriology, so salvation in the Old Testament, faith alone or faith plus works. Charles Jennings and David Preston. Then right after that, we've got the continuation of our Evolution Debate Challenge series, Ken Hovind and Daria Bloodworth. How are whales and pine trees related? So stay tuned. If you're not yet subscribed, but you love debates, interviews, lectures, discussions, and more, please make sure to hit that subscribe button. All right. That being said, break time is over, gentlemen. Great job so far. And we are going to open it up
Okay.
into free-flowing discussion. Luca just ended with his rebuttal, so why don't we hand it to TRock to kick us off in the discussion. Go ahead, gentlemen.
Okay, I've got several things I would like to talk about, but I'll start at the top of the list here. Age, Luca, you mentioned that age indicates that our health is improving over time, and you related that to the genetic cause behind that. The problem is that the examples you gave of the medieval period and that sort of thing, times of war, times of disease. Sanford actually addressed this very thing specifically on age and longevity, in that longevity, maximum lifespan, has not increased over time. Average lifespan has, yes, but again, that's affected by war and disease and that sort of thing. But maximum lifespan has not been affected by so-called beneficial mutations or passage of time or anything else, because people have been well known to live well over 100 years, long before those periods that you mentioned.
Okay, my point was not about age, but really our stature. So how much we were big or small. If you go in medieval Burg, you will see that doors, houses, everything, it was made for smaller humans, smaller, 1.6, 1.5 meters. Of course, they were not dwarves. It's not like we are talking about hobbits. But yeah, they were smaller, and a lot of people in the chat is telling me, yeah, it's because they add less to it, and it's true. But our dimensions are determined by genetics, of course. Then natural selection will play a role. If you have a lot of food, you can grow bigger because you are not affected by it.
Okay.
And genetics
Can you stop and let me kind of address something you said here? Because I really just have a couple of questions based on what you said. It sounds like you're attributing greater height to what? Beneficial mutations accumulating faster than deleterious mutations, or you're attributing it to natural selection? What are you attributing
of course,
greater
you
average
need
height?
to have beneficial mutation to have an increase in dimension in humans or any other animal.
Okay,
and
so
we see that.
Okay, so 2 points. Number one, just like age, well exceeding 100 years, long before those epics that you mentioned, height also well exceeded those stats you gave long before those epics ever came about. People were known to be in the 8 and even 9 foot range long before that. So it sounds to me like what you're actually describing is allele frequency and diet much more than you are the cause and effect of genetic entropy.
But even if I gave you the 9 foot tall humans, and I need proof of that,
There's plenty of
if
historic
we get
proof.
to 1.5 meters, I cannot use foot. I am a metric guy. I work with the international system. I do not understand anything in imperial system. Sorry. So if we get to 1.5 meters and now we are at 1.7, even a little bit more than that, because I've said average, but I'm quite short if compare me to a lot of my friends. People are getting taller. Why? Because we can eat whatever we want. Back then, no. And that's natural selection. If you are too big, like 2 meters tall, Yeah, maybe if you are soldier, and we have example of that with people from Serbia, they were very, very tall, and they were used like human tanks, because if you are 2 meters tall and everyone else is 1.5, 1.6 meters, you will kill everyone on the battlefield without very much.
Okay, let me address what you've
Yeah.
said so far. I kind of pointed this out in my presentation, that some of these words and ideas are super subjective, and they are. And so is it beneficial to be taller and bigger? Well, again, it's a super subjective idea, and let me give you a good example that I think illustrates this very well. Textbook example of natural selection for increased height in giraffes. So taller giraffe reaches higher in the tree, has more food available to him. Shorter giraffes can't reach the food, therefore natural selection prefers the taller giraffes, and they get to move on, and the shorter giraffes eventually fade into the background because they were not as fit. Now, that's an environmental causation there. Now, why is that so subjective of an idea? Because what happens when the first drought comes along? Well, the trees don't grow as much, the food is less, the water is less, the giraffes have less resources to rely on, but they're already big and they need more. So now that exact same height advantage that they gained is now a major disadvantage to them, because it's the smaller animals that can take advantage of not needing as much intake as the larger animals. So how does being taller as a human prove to be some sort of advantage for natural selection or an environmental benefit? Again, the topic to be debated here is genetic entropy. You're not actually describing entropy. You're describing a very subjective idea of what you think is better. And then you have to give it a context. And sometimes that when the context changes, that supposed benefit goes completely away and actually becomes a hindrance, not a benefit.
Yes, but my point is not about fitness, because yeah, it's true. You can be more fit if you are shorter. In medieval and Roman times, that was the case, because you need less food. You are more fit to live in those eras. But still, if you have genetic entropy, you are going in decline. How can you increase anything? If you can, genetic entropy does not work. Define fitness. How can you define fitness? And
Well, no,
show me something. Sorry, let me finish. Show me something that's degenerating in a straight line, and then look.
Okay, I'm glad you asked that, because I actually have a couple things I could be sharing here. One of the things that Sanford did in regards to fitness, and see that this is just it. When you actually dig into the details, fitness is the epicenter of the debate. And how do you know what fitness is? Well, you have to have beneficial mutations to increase fitness. You have to have deleterious mutations to decrease fitness. And so fitness is determined by some mathematical standard in population genetics. And so population genetics, of course, is not a creationist thing per se. There are dozens, if not hundreds, of population geneticists out there that are evolutionist, and they still use a metric for fitness. And it is like I said, it's the epicenter of the debate. So what Sanford did was, one of his co-authors, if you look at the creation.com article that I sent you, Genetic Entropy, the long article that gives 10 reasons or 10 refutations from Sanford, one of the things that he talks about, I believe it is in number 9? No, it's in number 10, the very first one. He's got them in reverse order, so he starts at 10 and works down. But his point C, he talks about a Dr. Tomoko Oda from Japan. It's a female doctor. Well, she's he calls her the world's foremost authority on deleterious mutations. And so he sent one of his co-authors over there to have a discussion that took over the course of a few days or so about their particular methodology for measuring fitness. And Dr. Tomoko specifically agreed with them on their method for measuring fitness and fitness decline, and particularly near neutral mutations. And her take was that, yes, Sanford was correct, that near neutral mutations actually have a deleterious lean. They do accumulate, and they are not removed by natural selection.
Seems wonderful, but let's show me some data where I can see increase in fitness.
That's great. I'm actually going to share my screen.
Good.
Give me just a second to find. I've got so many screens open here, so give me just a second, and I will share a screen with you that actually does that. So, share screen. Okay, so in my presentation, I did not actually go to this slide to show everybody, but I'm going to do that real quick because it's actually, I think it will be helpful for a lot of people. What I did was I went and downloaded Mendel's Accountant. That is the software that that Sanford and a team of people developed in order to measure this very thing, fitness level, accumulation of deleterious mutations, accumulation of beneficial mutations, and so on, to make his case. So I hope I left that up there long enough for people to see where to go to get that. I think this first link, now I actually did this, but I think this first link takes you to a page that points you where to go. And the second one is the actual location of the download that you can do. So it's a web-based app. When you download it and run it on your computer, it's basically running on the web, but it's using your computer resources. So anyway, I won't take the time to restart. I would, because it is really instructive. It's just that it takes several minutes sometimes to get this to run, because population genetics can be very CPU intensive. So I'll go back to the beginning, though. I'm on the plot page here. And so there's a number of plots here, average mutations per individual. Let's see if it's going to, distribution of accumulated mutations. It's not switching for me for some reason. I may have to restart this. I apologize for that. I guess it times out. I brought it up trying to make sure I had it ready for everybody. And I may actually have to close that and start it from scratch. So I really do apologize. I kind of suspected this was going to be an issue. It's just that it apparently loses contact with the server. Can you still hear me, Donnie?
Oh yeah. Yep.
Okay. I mean, it may take a minute. I guess while we're waiting on this to load up, Luca, you can go ahead and address your next point.
Okay. Well, I've seen all the material you send me, and also when we are talking about something like Mendel's Accountant, I have something to say. It's very useful to use this kind of software in science. But you need to remember that when you do science, empirical evidence comes first. So you can have the best software, the best model you can get, and maybe it's wrong. I've seen a very complex hypothesis it was made by a senior professor and was destroyed by an undergrad student during an experiment. Because if you cannot observe in the real world, it's wrong. Maybe the software is a very good software, but no software can recreate reality ever.
That's interesting you should say that, because numerical simulation seems to be the go-to tool for just about every other discussion that evolutionists want to have. They use numerical simulation for all kinds of things, relatedness between chimps and humans, for example. Now you're telling me what? I can't trust that data because it's
can be a useful data, but it
okay.
needs to be backed up by experiment.
So have you actually run Mendel's accountant yet?
No, not in this time, but
I think you need to do that before you pass judgment like that, and I'll tell you why. Because it is actually a highly sophisticated deal. It's actually accessed and used by thousands and thousands of prospective PhD students working on their thesis for whatever. So it's extremely valuable in population genetics and genetic research. And when you actually go into the page, I have it up here now. Can you see this?
Right now, no.
I've got it back up. Yep, it's on screen for you, TRock.
Okay. What I wanted to do is separate my pages so I can. Okay. So here, what you're doing is you're putting in the total non-neutral mutation rate. What is that rate? Well, that rate is known to be, it's set as a default as 10, which is really low. It's known to actually be in excess of 100. So to put 100 in there is actually somewhat conservative. Beneficial deleterious ratio. So what you're saying is how many beneficial mutations exist per how many deleterious mutations. A very, very favorable number would be 1 in 1,000. But you can give it 10 times as much. It's not going to matter. Reproduction rates, this is essentially, they define it as how many offspring an individual can have. 2 is appropriate perhaps for modern human populations. Wind back the clock, animals, or look at the animal kingdom, and that number would actually be much higher. And so I'm going to leave it low on purpose just because it takes a while to calculate these. Population size, I'm going to increase it to 1,000. And you can see as you go through here, there are tons and tons of real world parameters that you're putting in. This is not a child's toy as far as just playing around with things you think might happen. It's a legitimate numerical research tool. Selection criteria that you can put in, fraction of offspring lost apart from selection, population numbers, methods of computation, special applications. There's a lot of parameters that go into this. I'm going to leave most of it at the default though. Hit continue. I'm going to hit execute. It's going to take a minute to crunch through here, but when it's done, we will get to see what the long-term effects are, and you'll get to see. And so when you say, what's the data? Well, let me point this out real quick, and then I'll stop and let you respond. The whole premise of mutation accumulation is how websites like 23andMe and those types that do, what's the word I'm looking for? You're looking for your family history. The whole premise behind why those work is because mutations accumulate and they stay. If they did not accumulate, or if they did not stay, you wouldn't be able to do that. You would have these severe discontinuities, and you wouldn't be able to tell relatedness between anything. So to argue that somehow there is no data, there's plenty of data when you review actual genomes and how the concept of accumulated mutations apply.
Go ahead, Luca.
Okay, so I was not saying that this kind of software is not a good software or anything else. But when you do science, experiments are always on top. Software can be useful, I'm sure of it, but still the most important things are data collected in nature. So you would need, if this software is correct, to find a similar distribution in nature on a certain track. So yeah, you
So
can
here,
have.
Sorry, I'm not trying to interrupt you. I just have a hard time telling when you're done. Fitness, you talked about fitness. Absolutely a measurement of population genetics, and extreme, like I said, it's the epicenter of this this whole debate. Here is the fitness curve. When you try to put in real world parameters, like you saw, I put in 1 in 100 beneficial mutations, which is way generous for beneficial mutations. Actually, Sanford refers to them, and the professional population geneticists that are evolutionists don't disagree with him, that beneficial mutations are actually what he referred to as exceedingly rare. But you see what the fitness level, fitness and population size. So you've got two different scales here on the left. The population size is the farthest left, and the decimal numbers are the fitness level. And you can see an exponential decline in fitness in just a handful of generations. And so let me address one other point you tried to make. You said you need to see this effect, and you talked about this 1 to 5% thing. First of all, like I said, Sanford does not subscribe to the 5% idea. He says it's much less than that. He actually gives a number of generations that he believes kind of represents the upper limit before genetic entropy takes its toll on the human race. That number of generations is 268. So one of his critics tried to refute this. Actually, Ron Garrett, in his debate against Paul Price, tried to refute this. But what Ron didn't do was the basic math. Ron referred to it as less than 300. Okay, fair enough. Sanford says 268 kind of represents the upper limit. What is 268 in terms of years? It's a little over 8,000. So it's still 2,000 years away. And so I guess the next question is, on the one hand, how can you test something 2,000 years away? On the other hand, you're an evolutionist. How can you test something 3 billion years away if you can't even test something 2,000 years away? But let me offer you a way to actually test this concept. Would you agree that if you took stats on average number of diseases per person in the world, if that number went up and the average person in the world over, say, a 100-year period carried more diseases or more dysfunctions in their body than 100 years prior, would you not consider that evidence that fitness is declining and mutations are accumulating?
Depends, because if you think about it, first of all, it's true. In the past, you will see less people with problems. Why? I went in a school, you can see on my channel, that was an asylum. People with problems were thrown there. So you would not see them around very much, of course. Also, we can see more illness, yes, but we can treat those illness. If I was born just a couple 5 years sooner than I will be dead, because I was a stillborn. The technology to save me was just introduced at that time. So yeah, we can see more illness because we can treat more illness. Back then, people would just die.
Let me ask you a quick question.
Yeah.
Let me ask you a quick question. If you can treat an illness, does that automatically guarantee that you won't pass the mutations that caused it to the next generation?
It's quite the opposite. We are affecting natural selection in a bad way, in a certain way, from a certain point of view, of course, because if we save more people, those people will pass down genes. Like for me, I think that my problem was due to some incompatibility from my parents. So yeah, if I will ever have children, maybe they will have problems. I don't think so. I'm more than healthy now. It was just a thing about my I was not able to breathe back then. But was just a problem when I was born.
Okay, so that produces an interesting conundrum. you said that we are kind of bypassing the natural selection process by basically helping treat people with diseases. So it sounded like you acknowledged that yes, if you treat somebody and cause them to continue to live, that you are going to pass on your deleterious mutations, right? But what's the alternative is not treat them, and then what? They die prematurely.
No,
Okay.
I'm not suggesting that. I think that natural selection will find its way, because you can treat people with some condition, but when you have very serious mutation, you will die as a single cell. You will die before anything can be done. Most of women lost is firstborn. Well,
I'm sorry,
before.
can you say that again?
When on the first pregnancy, half of the women will lose the child. It's a very unfortunate thing, but it what it is. And back then was worse. I want to point it out.
Luca, I think in order for you to argue successfully that genetic entropy does not happen, you have to demonstrate that deleterious mutations do not accumulate and that beneficial mutations can outpace the deleterious ones. And so, Donnie, I apologize. We've not been focusing on this. Can you show my screen again? Because I wanted to kind of point this out in these numerical simulations. What you're looking at here is called the distribution of accumulated mutations for deleterious. Okay. You see where they go up to just north of 1.0 in some cases, but the very next page over here, this is the distribution of accumulated beneficial mutations. And this is based on real world data. One of the points that needs to come out of this, though, like I said, the idea of beneficial is highly, highly subjective. So give an example of a modern beneficial mutation. You want to talk about lactose intolerance, you want to talk about HIV resistance, and there's one other that they brought up having to do with malaria. The problem is that those so-called beneficial mutations are only contextually beneficial, but they also come with a deleterious side effect. So just to call something randomly a beneficial mutation is a little bit misleading, given the fact that most so-called beneficial mutations that we know of have a deleterious effect. So you can see how low the number is for the mutational fitness, and or it's the fraction of mutations retained in genomes. And then here is the other very important point: selection. You haven't talked a whole lot about selection and what its role is, but that actually is the thrust of most evolutionist arguments, natural selection. But what happens here is the selection curve drops exponentially as time passes because of the accumulation of deleterious effects. And so it's a purely additive process.
Okay. Well, you said that we cannot look into the past, but it's not true. We have quite some good data about population, life expectancy, how many children were born. All those data we have. Roman period in particular, but even during Middle Ages, we have a ton of material. We have genetic material from those people, and those graphs you are showing are wonderful, but I cannot see a counterpart on the real world, because we do have 4,000 years of history recorded. That's even you accept. And what you've shown in those graphs is an exponentially amount of deleterious mutations. So we will be all dead or all crippled, and we are not.
I think I already pointed out that it's an 8,000 time 8,000 year timeline by Sanford's calculation, and we've not reached that point. So how are we all dead? I'm not sure you're jumping that far ahead, but let me back up a little bit. You talked about the historical data that we have. Are you familiar with the mid 1800s in France? With do you know who Ignaz Semmelweis is?
Sorry, can
Do
you
you,
repeat?
do you know?
I did not understand.
Do you know who Ignaz Semmelweis is from the 1800s?
No.
Okay, so in the 1800s, and this directly addresses your point about longevity and average lifespan and that sort of thing. In the 1800s, there was a leading hospital in France, and I apologize, I don't remember the city, but the name alone, Ignaz Semmelweis, should spur you to go do some research, and you'll be easily able to find what I'm talking about. He worked out of a hospital. It was common practice that the mortician and the child birthing doctor were the same person. And so what they were doing was going down into the basement when they didn't have a child to deliver. They were cutting open cadavers with their bare hands and, studying anatomy as a matter of an educational process. And then whenever a child needed to be delivered, they would go upstairs with unwashed hands and deliver the child. And so they had an extremely high death rate at birth. And so much so that many people feared for their lives. Many women.
Well, yes.
Many women actually gave birth in the streets because they were afraid to go into the hospital. Now, what's the point there? It was self-induced early death on humanity. That's the point. The fix, Ignaz Semmelweis pointed out, hey, you guys need to wash your hands. Well, the scientist at the time basically ran him out of town, gave him all kinds of problems because his implication that they needed to wash their hands suggested that these fine doctors were not gentlemen. They were filthy street vendors or something. And so they took great offense to him. But the point is, a simple washing of the hands actually fixed the problem and reversed the rather low average life expectancy literally overnight. Has nothing whatsoever to do with genetics or mutation accumulation.
Yes, life expectancy has nothing to do with that. And I agree with that. In the Roman period, the average lifespan was 35 years old. I will be already dead or dying back then. So yeah, we cannot point that out. But still, we have corpses. We can know about illness, about their fitness in general, how much they were tall, if they had any defect at the genetic level. About Sanford at 8,000 timeline, apart that something like Jericho is older than that. But we still have 4,000 years of history recorded. And if you look at your graph, even if that are 8,000 years old, the most of the mutation was at the beginning. It was an incremental, exponential increasing. So we would already be noticing that. And also, average 8, it's not a good parameter, but I cannot understand how you can say we are degenerating if we are getting bigger and stronger. Because
again,
if I went to the medieval period, I will be a human tank. I will be given a suit of armor and I will swing under, and I will be unstoppable. Because if all other people are 1.5 meters tall or 1.6, I'm 10 centimeters taller than them, and I'm stronger.
Okay, so how specific of a context you had to provide to assume that that was a benefit to you. I'm going to leave that alone for a minute and back up a hair, because I did give you a metric in a way. You said that, you know, these 4,000 years have already passed. Why don't we see the effect? I've already given you a metric that you can use to determine that. When you go to the doctor, you get a long questionnaire. Do you have heart disease in your family history? Do you have cancer in your family history? Do you have diabetes? Do you have ear, nose, throat problems? Blah, blah, blah. It's a long list. The point is that how can you say we're less fit now? It's by how many diseases, dysfunctions, things that go wrong in the human body have accumulated in that time. Now, one of the mathematical implications that you seem to have overlooked is that the accumulation of deleterious mutations is linear. It's 100 per person per generation, so it's a linear extrapolation, but the fitness effect is actually exponential decline, which means that any snapshot in time, the actual effect on fitness is not necessarily directly it's not calculated the same way. You have to look at them two different ways. And what I'm providing you is a way to count diseases, count dysfunctions, count the obvious external visible effects of mutations over time. And we know them by the diseases that we carry.
Yeah, I want to respond to that. It's true, you have very long questionnaires, things like that. Back then, there were not. And you know what? You will be dying much more, because I've been into cemeteries. There are quite a lot of very old cemeteries around here, and you can read the age of the people, sometimes even the cause of death. And yeah, you will be not handle that questionnaire, and you will be dead. I have my mother's aunt died of cancer. They did not treat her. She just died. And they were in the 60s, not so long ago. Yeah, we have more illness because we can tell we have. Back then, people would just die.
So now it sounds like you're saying you had no way of measuring that in the past, but you're assuming we're getting better because you couldn't measure it then, and you know we have it now?
No. We can measure it. We can see how much people were dying back then. And yeah, a lot of people were dying, a lot less now. Yes, we have more illness. Back then, people will just die without even know why. We can tell, for the most part. We can see the DNA of those people. We have something like Otzi. Otzi, it's very, very old. It will be in your model a perfect human. It was not. So why? Why I cannot see that graph you showed?
Did you actually sequence the DNA of Otzi and compare it to modern DNA?
No, I did not, but I know that.
Well, that's what the center of the debate is are the mutations accumulating? So no, Otzi was not a perfect human being. He was post-flood, which means deleterious mutations had already been accumulating. If you read the Bible, you find out that people like Sarah and others had childbearing issues. There were a number of genetic issues that are described in the Bible reading through Genesis. So you can see that deleterious mutations were already accumulating long before Otzi came along. And this whole debate is about, are the deleterious mutations accumulating over time? And is that a threat to the longevity of the human race?
Yes, so in your model, people like Otzi will be less degenerated than us.
Correct.
Like people in Jericho, like people in the Middle East, in very ancient cities. Why I do not see so much work on that.
So
you creationists will be the first to do something like that because it can prove your points.
So what was it brings us to another really subtle point about genetic entropy in general, and that is what causes a deleterious mutation in the first place. So I want to take a minute and real quickly separate two ideas: adaptation versus mutations. I personally, when I say mutation, I mean something that was just random and unplanned, and is typically counterproductive to the life of the organism, whereas adaptations are inbuilt responses to the environment and that sort of thing. So I'm specifically talking about mutations, but what causes them? Well, okay, if you had lead in your water supply, do you think that would trigger some mutations?
Probably, I do not know.
What do you mean? What do you mean you don't know? There are laws all over the state of California in the U.S. about the use of lead because it causes birth defects. Of course, you know.
I'm in Italy. I never heard of that. I know that lead can cause problem in humans, but
how about how? It's the same DNA. It has to do with ionic bonding and attractions between molecules and atoms. It has nothing to do with whether you're a human or an animal. And so, what about smoking a cigarette? Do you think that induces deleterious mutations that are passed on at reproduction?
Whoa!
Obviously,
to be passed on, because
yeah.
if you need to pass on, you need to have a mutation.
Have you never seen a Surgeon General's warning on a pack of cigarettes?
Yeah, reduce fertility, but
okay. I think you know these. What I'm trying to do here for you, Luca, is make a point. So I'm giving some extreme examples of what obviously drive deleterious mutations. But let's take it a slightly different direction. What if you get too much salt in your diet? Is there a health condition associated with too much salt in your diet? Say yes. Please say yes. Everybody else in the world is saying yes right now. What if you get too much sugar in your diet? These aren't like bizarre, harsh chemicals we're talking about. They're chemicals that your body can actually synthesize. In the case of salt, you need it. In the case of sugar, you can definitely use it and you need it in certain circumstances, but there is a temperance level. But the point is that it doesn't matter whether it's a harsh chemical or something your body is designed to use. Little adjustments in quantity and timing and everything else absolutely have an effect on fitness and mutations that are passed on. But then let's take the perfect example. What about the person that is a vegan all their life? They don't consume too much salt. They're not a diabetic from eating too much sugar. They don't have lead in their water supply. They don't smoke. Guess what? They still have deleterious mutations that they pass on. So even...
But still, what it's bugging me, it's that where I live, thousands of years, you can see them when you walk around the street. I've been into buildings that old, 2,000 or more years old, and we know a great deal about this population. I know for a fact that women several thousand years old was living back then. It's not like she was that old. She had diabetes. So if we are getting worse, we will see that from our record. Someone like Otzi will be far less degenerated than us. Romans will be less degenerated than us. And it's not what we see. We see population that can get better in certain things. I will touch on this point on my next debate with Owen. We can see beneficial mutation, and we can see those accumulating in cows or crops. Plants are a very good example in this kind of things, but even animals can. And we do not see what you have shown to me, because it's a program. Reality, it's not like that. You cannot, at least I can be proven wrong on that, but you did not show to me a real graph. It was a real graph, of course, but what I mean is you cannot show to me something like that in a real population, humans or otherwise.
Yeah, I can. I just showed you how to do that. I don't have the graph. No, I don't have it with me, but I just showed you how you can track the increase in diseases in the population. And so, I mean, pick one disease, heart disease, or cancer, whatever. You can track how frequently it appears in the population. And so, not everybody's family is prone to, succumb to cancer or to have it, but nevertheless, if genetic entropy is true, you have a metric that you can go get data on today and put it together and see what the trend is. And that trend should be that cancer frequency increases in the population over time. Now, can you artificially suppress it for a while? Absolutely, you can, but you can't get rid of it. If you go around and kill everybody that's got cancer or has a mutation that leads to cancer, you can artificially suppress it. But evolution isn't about artificially suppressing anything. And then you also said that people in the past, you think they had all these health problems, but you also said they didn't even know what was wrong with them. They just died. So how do you do that? How do you jump from they had all these health problems, but you don't know what was wrong with them because they just died?
You know that you can examine their corpses also on their Earth diseases. You know that there is an actual mutation near me. We even know what was the guy who developed that beneficial mutation that reduce Earth diseases, and that mutation is taking over because it's very beneficial. So natural selection is selecting that, and we see similar things.
Again, I think we
like
find out that most
lactose tolerance and things like that.
Yeah, I think we're still back to the point where you find that most what's called beneficial mutations actually come with a deleterious side effect. But I also wanted to point out in your historic examples, you know that malnutrition also contributes to a number of deficiencies and diseases and stuff like that. Again, has nothing whatsoever to do with the accumulation of deleterious mutations. The fix is just eat right, and you get the benefits immediately.
Well, yeah, it can, but it was a selection. People were eating less, but they were eating. It's not like they were starving. People during medieval period, they were not that poor, but of course they were eating less than us. So that brings the selection on smaller people because you can survive better.
Well,
It's not like they were starving. You will have food less than now, but you will have it.
So let me ask you this then. How do you intend to show graphically, since that seems to be your standard, how do you intend to show graphically that mutations are not accumulating over time?
I've shown you a practical example. If we have a genetic entropy and we are getting worse, how we can increase certain parameters?
I've already answered that very thoroughly. I'm not sure how you're stuck on that. That has nothing to do with genetics. It has to do with your daily lifestyle.
Yes, it does. Age is genetic. You can have other problems, but when you are starving and your problems are given by that, you will tell by the skeletal structure and things like that. We are talking about smaller humans, not deformed ones.
So mainly you've talked about size and age, but I've already pointed out it's a basic.
No. Age was not a point because age, people were dying in their 30s.
So it's size and strength that you're focusing on.
Yeah, it's
so
a trait.
Again, it's a basic historic example, a basic historic research. You can see that people were quite large long before the medieval period. All you've described at best is allele frequency. You've not described mitigating the accumulation of deleterious mutations.
as I said, how much is 9 foot tall? Because I think it's pretty tall.
9 foot tall. Let me see if I can give you a number for that real quick. And I mean, take 8 foot tall. It doesn't matter. It's well above your 1.5 meters anyway. So what is 8 feet tall in terms of meters? 1 meter is equal to what? 1.28 or sorry, 3.28 feet, right? So there you go. 8 divided by 3.28, 2.4 meters for 8 feet tall. People have been that tall long before the medieval period. All you gotta do is some history search.
Okay, where because my graph was going back to Neolithic, so quite far back.
Can
To
you
be
quantify
fair,
that?
In your model, Neolithic is not even a thing.
Okay. How do you know how many years ago was that? Are you proposing?
Neolithic period, it was 10, 12,000 years old.
10, 12,000 years? That's long prehistory. I think there's some huge evolutionary assumptions behind that because most evolutionists assume
we have. Look, we can see that the dates are wrong, but at least here in Italy, we have things that go back that period. We have structures like Stonehenge. It's not in Italy, of course, but we have similar structures. So we have
I
a good
understand. What I want to do for you is correlate I want to correlate the size that you're proposing. You're proposing that during this period, 10,000 years ago, people were much smaller, right? Now we can the actual amount of time. All
I
of that
can look
aside,
into the data. Let me. Okay, Neolithic age. 3000 BCA, women were 1.5 meters tall, basically. Well, little bit more in Britain and Germany, but it was expected. And let me see on males how much that was. Okay. Males, they were during the Neolithic, so 5,000, 3,000 BCE, so 7,000 years ago, less than 1.7 meters average, and on whole population.
okay, so you're giving an average. Again, all you're describing is change in allele frequency because there are pharaohs associated with timelines that supposedly contradict the biblical timeline, and some of those pharaohs were very tall people well above that average. So again, you're literally just describing allele frequency.
An average of 2 meters, more than 2 meters tall. So when was that? Because my data goes back.
No, that's my point. That's not what allele frequency is. The average, you can have 99.999% of the population exactly at the average that you propose, and that would be the average with that other 0.001%, and that one guy can be twice what the average is. But because he exists, his alleles can get passed on over time, and the allele frequency increases over time. So he already existed.
Sorry, but your point is that we are decreasing in thickness. So you will see something like 8 to decrease too, because you were telling me that humans were 8 feet tall, so more than 2 meters. So where I can find that data? Because back then, America was not a thing. There was no population there, or it was very small. No, I think it was already there, but not.
So
cannot
again,
remember.
Again, it's a basic historic review.
Where I can find those 8 feet tall humans, of course, you can find some. People can get that big, and you can get even in those ages people of that size, and we know that those existed. I mentioned people from Serbia. They were very important in the war effort because they were huge. And back then, when you were fighting with a sword, if you are 2 meters tall, you are unstoppable. So yeah, they were humans that big, but the important thing is the average, not.
I think the other major point here, Luca, is that you are very erroneously equating height and size with fitness and or a supposed increase in fitness over time, because size has supposedly increased, and I will freely grant you that the average size human being is bigger than it was in the past, but you're falsely equating that with fitness. That has nothing in the world to do with fitness. I don't think there's a geneticist alive on the planet, evolutionary or otherwise, that would agree with you that somehow is some kind of indicator of fitness. It's not. It's
okay.
practically
Give me a
irrelevant.
good indicator of fitness. Sorry, I was not mean to talk over you. Give me a trait that I can relate to.
I did. Disease. Disease is an indicator of fitness.
Disease. There were a lot of diseases back then, and
But you said nobody recorded them, and they don't know what they died of.
It's not like they recorded the exact diseases, but they recorded how many people died, and then you can make studies about them.
Yeah.
About that. And they did.
Fair enough.
A lot of people had diseases. We have studies on Spanish flu and things like that. We have studies on the plague. A lot of studies on the plague. A lot of people were dying back then. Not always on plague, but we have extensive research on that.
So the fundamental question you're trying to answer, though, is, do deleterious mutations accumulate over time? Yes or no?
For me, no. I cannot see such a thing. So I cannot see people getting more sick. No.
You can't.
People were sick back then.
You do know we have an economy. You do know we have an economy built around people getting sick, right?
Yeah,
gentlemen,
they were. Yes, sorry, Donnie.
No, that's okay. Fantastic, very technical, engaging discussion. I let the discussion go a little bit over time because you guys were discussing so many good points. But I think this might be a good place to wrap it up. I would say this was pretty comprehensive, pretty thorough. But if there are any final points or rebuttals that you gentlemen wanted to make, we do have 5-minute closing statements. So we'll use this time to wrap up our thoughts, wrap up our points. Again, great job. Clearly a lot of prep was done, so I do appreciate that. And TRock, since you were the affirmative tonight, why don't we hand it over to you for your 5-minute closing statement. Luca, we'll give you 5 minutes, then we'll get into these audience questions. TRock, before you go, I do want to remind everybody in the audience, that means we've got about 10 minutes. So if you have any, final questions you want to make sure to get in so we can ask the debaters, please do it now. Final questions. TRock, whenever you're ready, I'm going to hand it over to you. You got 5 minutes.
Okay. Just a quick recap. I opened starting to talk about the definitions of entropy and randomness and stuff like that. And I think I effectively pointed out that the concept of order is highly subjective. The concept of beneficial versus deleterious is highly subjective and contextual. One of the things that I wanted to bring out there was that when you look at the equations for entropy, what you see is that as mass increases, the total system heat necessarily increases with it, and therefore the entropy increases. So if entropy is a tendency toward disorder, that means that as something is going through the growing process, its tendency towards disorder increases. Well, how is that relevant to genetic entropy? It's because the disorder that's alluded to has to do with, well, in the one instance I gave for closed systems, where they took the Boltzmann constant and multiplied it times the number of possible configurations. This is absolutely a good refutation if you went that route for evolution in the traditional sense of molecules to man kind of thing, because the entropy increases as the number of possible configurations increase, and early life started with a rather low number of total peptides in the genome compared to what we have in humans. So as that genome becomes more complex, entropy goes up with it. And so exactly what does that mean in really practical, simple terms? What does that mean? That means that because it's heat and energy, you're talking about moving atoms. You're talking about moving atoms and molecules via heat and basically stirring the pot, so to speak. So how do you accidentally stir the pot and get something better through purely random processes? You can't. You're moving molecules, you're changing which molecules are going to bind to what, and it's a purely random process. So entropy, like the PowerPoint slide I said, the thoughtco.com pointed out that randomness, disorder, they're kind of synonymous. He calls them imprecise, but they're only imprecise because you want to compare them to some hypothetical construct that doesn't actually exist. Anyway, beyond that, what I wanted to demonstrate is that we actually can measure the accumulation of deleterious mutations over time. It's how these heritage websites do what they do. It's genetics 101. Compare my generation to generations past and see how they have accumulated. If they're not accumulating, there's no way to do that. I don't think Luca effectively addressed that at all. And then I guess I'll close real quick. My other point was he was supposed to show us how natural selection mitigates the accumulation of deleterious mutations, but I don't think he did that either. And I think what I showed is that beneficial versus deleterious, it's highly contextual anyway, and what's beneficial today may not be beneficial tomorrow. It may be actually a major hindrance. So I'm going to close with that, and thank you very much for your time.
Okay, thank you, TRock, for that 5-minute concluding statement. Luca, whenever you're ready, you've got 5 minutes as well. Go ahead.
I would love to talk a little more about entropy, but I will go on a kill streak. Sorry, TRock, but your presentation on that was wrong. First of all, it's isolated system, not closed. The theory about that is changed. There is a little bit of difference between closed and isolated system. Second law of entropy work only on isolated system, so we are open system. The second law of thermodynamics do not apply on us. And also, I would like to ask another thing. So, someone please ask this question to discuss a little bit more on entropy, because I will love it. On mutations, so I'm baffled, because if we are getting bigger and somewhat stronger, it's still a genetic entropy. I cannot tell what is not. We have more diseases. No, we know about a lot more, but if you think about during the medieval period on the plague, we lost literally half of the continent to illness. So yeah, back then more illness, far more. But back then, if you die, you die. You go in a cemetery or in a mass grave, and that's it. So yeah, I cannot see a distribution like you said, that we are getting worse. Far from it. People were dying like flies back then. So yeah, I think that I've given a good point, because if you go in a very old city and look at those structure, I do not think you will think, yeah, I'm less fit than those people. I do not think that. And also, people look at your children or your grandchildren are worse than you. I cannot see that. I see very intelligent children and very fit ones. Of course, you can see some children with problems, but if you think about it, back then they would be sent into asylum or things like that. So yeah, now we can help them. Back then, no. I pretty much done.
Okay, thank you, Luca. That is your 5-minute concluding statement. All right, very comprehensive, thorough, and technical debate. So I enjoyed it. I think the last really, really technical debate we had, Luca, was you and Professor McQueen on the heat problem. So these are important topics where we take something very specific and we take a deep dive into it. So TRock and Luca, thank you so much. Also, to everybody in the audience, thank you for your feedback, your super chats, your super stickers, and your questions. So I got a solid amount of questions here that we will get through. So I believe we'll be able to get through all of these. Also, the debaters, TRock and Luca, will both be back here in the next month. So I'll give a shout out to a couple of those debates, TRock and T-Jump. So Battle of the T's, the end of August. There's a lot of hype for this one. Creation versus evolution. So this will be just your classic creation versus evolution debate. I also just scheduled on the channel in the event section another classic creation evolution debate between Matt Powell and David Emery. So make sure to check that out in the event section. Luca will also be back here in about a week, the 5th or the 6th, right, Luca?
Yes.
And you'll be debating Dr. Dino. You'll be taking the Evolution Debate Challenge. Actually, you'll be taking it twice. So you'll be debating Kent specifically on beneficial mutations. The 2022 Evolution Debate Challenge series continues. And then a couple weeks after that, you'll be debating, I'm not sure who this guy is, Donnie B. So I hear he's written a book on ERV. So yeah, you and I will be debating endogenous retroviruses. So are endogenous retroviruses evidence that humans and chimps share a common ancestor? So TRock and Luca, if you like what you're seeing from them, they will both be back here. Actually, TRock's also going to be here debating Snake was right on is evolution evil? So a couple debates for the both of you in the next month. All right. Well, that being said, break time is over. TRock and Luca, let's get into these questions. As we typically do, whoever the question is for, we'll make sure they get the last word, but we'll give you both the opportunity to make some points and provide your thoughts. Here we go. First question that came in all the way near the beginning of the debate. So Tanya Brown, thank you so much. Question is for Luca. With the advent of modern medicine saving people that would normally be selected out, do you expect humans to become less and less fit?
It's possible, but I think that we will be a stop to that, because when mutations are really, really bad, you will just die even before you are born. And I mean way back. So, yeah.
All right. Thank you, Luca. T-Jump, over to you.
Sorry, wrong T.
Or
TRock.
TRock. Yeah, sorry about that.
Understood. No, it's cool. It's cool. No, okay. So with the advent of modern medicine saving people that would normally be selected out, do you expect humans to become less and less fit? I mean, this is exactly the point I was trying to make for Luca earlier. The two alternatives are treat them and let them pass on their genes, or don't treat them and let them die. Both end in the same conclusion. Mutations keep accumulating. Neither one of those alternatives stops it. So on the one hand, what it sounds like Luca is saying is, okay, we have this thing called artificial selection where we artificially bypass some of the effects of mutation accumulation, except he also kind of acknowledged that, yeah, you are going to perpetuate diseases in the process. But what's the alternative? The alternative is not treat them. And then what happens? People die out. Okay, so hypothetically, maybe what they died of becomes less and less common. Fitness level in general increases. Okay, but what that does is, on the one hand, it decreases population size, which increases the potential for inbreeding, which increases the potential for deleterious mutations. Neither scenario helps very much. One of them could potentially accelerate genetic entropy more than the other, but they both end result is genetic entropy, accumulation of deleterious mutations over time.
Well, thank you very much for your answer, the young Earth creationist version of T-Jump. So TRock, thank you so much. And Luca Medugno, question was for you. We'll give you the last word. Go ahead, my good man.
Yes, it's true that will have an effect, but I think that we will reach a point where the mutation will be too much and natural selection will step in. Not artificial selection, even though we can apply even that, because we can find out in some cases if the baby has problems very, very soon. So we can also select that. It's not a very good thing, but if we will eventually have a problem with that, I do not think we are there yet, but I think we will act upon it if this will become a problem. But I think that natural selection will handle it naturally, I think.
All right. Thank you, Tanya, for the question. And gentlemen, thank you for the responses. Okay, let's get the next question up here. This is more of just an objection / question for you, TRock. From Human Ape. If genetic entropy were true, then the inevitable deterioration of DNA would show up more strongly in species with higher mutation rates than in species with lower mutation rate. So Human Apes coming at you, TRock. What are your thoughts on that, brother?
That is not true. It's just a misunderstanding of what's happening in the real biological world. Sanford actually addresses this very thing. If genetic entropy were true, then the inevitable deterioration of DNA would show up more strongly in species with higher mutation rates. Okay, in the natural world, species with higher mutation rates typically is going to refer to things like bacteria and viruses and that sort of thing, but their population sizes are so large that the process is slowed down considerably by reason of their very large population sizes, and they can cycle through variants very, very quickly. It still happens, but it does not happen faster. It happens slower. It's the opposite of what this claim is. What's probably more relevant is the generation time. So the longer generation times are affected more directly than the slower generation times are. That's why humans accumulate mutations fast, and so it's a function of generation time, not the mutation rate by itself.
Thank you, TRock. Luca, over to you.
I do not agree with that. Human ape is right. It will be affecting those organisms more. like viruses. If genetic entropy is true, virus would go extinct, because if it's true that you cannot add new genetic material, you will reach that point where you have only deleterious mutations. So viruses will go extinct sooner or later, and that's not what we see. On the contrary, we see sometimes a very strong breed of viruses or bacteria. So it's even true that those populations have a larger probability to have transposon interacting with them. More simple is an organism. I did create my first GMO when I was, I think, 18 years old, and it was a nematode. Yes, they are more inclined to have those kind of swaps on the DNA. So yeah, I think that genetic entropy does not work with those organisms. And even if they lose some strands, it's not a big deal because they reproduce very fast, a lot.
All right. Thank you, Luca, for your input and for your points. TRock, question was for you. Get the last word.
So I think it's interesting that Luca brought up viruses. I brought up bacteria, but they actually both, there are published studies in the open literature on both that very well demonstrate genetic entropy happens. So viruses, go read Sanford's paper on the H1N1 from the Spanish flu. Basically what they showed was that they very well document the trend of mutations, how they flowed over the years. It was a rare example of how you could get that much genomic data on an organism over that span of time. And yeah, the H1N1, the human version, went extinct. The swine version is still in existence, but the human version that caused the Spanish flu actually is extinct. And so they basically projected from that study, they said, hey, COVID-19, what do you do about it? You want the mutation rate to be high because it will drive it to basically either be ineffective or extinct, one of the two. And so one of the absolute trackable stats in history is that pandemics are almost always short-lived. They have a peak and then they start waning over time. They what's the attenuate is the word that Sanford uses. Epidemics have a strong tendency to attenuate over time, meaning that they lose their effectiveness, and in some cases they do go extinct. So yeah, no, Luca, viruses absolutely make the point of genetic entropy.
All right, much appreciated, TRock and Luca. Okay, next question that comes in is from Iron Matt. Iron Matt, thank you so much for your question. And maybe it's a question for both, not really any specification. So we'll read it together and figure it out. So he says, people in Vietnam are still short. Why? Isn't it nutrition? When they come over here, their children grow tall. When they come over here, their children grow tall in one generation. So related to a good chunk of your discussion during the discussion portion. So whoever, why don't we have Luca? What are your thoughts on that? And we'll start with you.
I have no data on that. For what I can tell, I cannot think that's natural selection, but I do not know. Maybe they can grow tall because they have genetic pool here. So if you marry a Vietnamese woman, you will have taller children or things like that. If you can show me that consistently every time those children get taller in only one generation, yeah, it will be a problem for my point. But I don't know.
TRock, over to you.
So, still short. Why isn't it nutrition? Yeah, I would totally agree. Nutrition is one of the factors. Genomic regulation is another important factor, and nutrition can obviously impact that. But probably environment can too. There are a number of complex factors that go into it. But yes, in a single generation, yeah, and that's part of the whole problem here is that biology responds today. It doesn't wait till 10,000 years down the road to make a response. So and again, height. How does that relate to fitness? Somehow or another, Luca tried to make a correlation between size and strength and fitness, but there literally isn't one. So it everything about size does not make the point that Luca was trying to make.
All right. So I'm assuming that was a question for the both of you. So we got a response from the both of you, and we'll go to the next question. Okay, here's one that comes in from Alan 1978, $5 super chat. Thank you so much. And the question is for TRock. How does the term survival of the fittest and natural selection relate to entropy to disprove evolution?
Okay, so the general argument, and even from the professional crowd, those with PhDs on relevant subjects, is that natural selection basically culls the excessive accumulation of deleterious mutations. We didn't get to dig into this too deep, but I said early on, natural selection has nothing at all to do with genetic, or I said nothing at all, has very little to do. It's a lesser player in genetic diversity and the accumulation of deleterious mutations as well. It's not doing what people think it does. One of the examples I wanted to give on this very subject was the lion and the zebra. So the textbook theory, quote unquote theory in the street sense of the word, the hypothesis is that the faster lion is going to catch the slower zebra, and therefore the faster zebras are selected to continue their gene pool. That's not even reality. The zebra that the lion catches is the very young one that may have the fastest genes in the gene pool, but he's so young he can't run fast enough to get away, or he catches the very old one that has already passed his genes on, and maybe he passed on the slowest genes. This very hand-wavy idea of natural selection does not even fit reality at all. And so one of the things I also showed on my graph here was that the selection threshold drops exponentially as deleterious mutations increase anyway, and natural selection can't prevent that. All it can do is select what's there. So I'll let Luca respond.
All right.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Yeah, go ahead, Luke.
Sorry. Well, I think that obviously natural selection is a very important factor. Of course, you have mutation on the base. It's what, not only mutation, because you have insertion, things like that. But let's talk principally on mutation. Mutation will create the variability, and then natural selection will select upon it. What I cannot understand on the creationist position is that mutation are almost always bad, but mutation does work modifying genes, and when you modify a gene, you will modify the proteins that genes creates. So you cannot tell right now if it's a bad thing or not. Also, the fitness is relative. As I was saying, yes, it's not always the best to be taller or even stronger, because if you do not have so much to it, it's better to be smaller. It's what evolution is. It does not care about our perception of things. So yeah.
All right. Thank you, Luca. TRock, question was for you. We'll give you the last word. Go ahead.
Okay, so one other really important point I wanted to bring out about this. So this is, how does it disprove evolution? I'm going to go back to the textbook description of what entropy is. So in the textbook description, in an open system, how do you decrease entropy? Well, what you do is you take energy from the environment, create some sort of feedback loop to basically restore some of the order. Now, here's a really important part that can't be missed. It takes energy. Natural selection is not energy. It's just simply a descriptive way to talk about a process. You have to put energy back into the system. You can't simply just subtract something from the system and say you've put energy into it. That's not how entropy is overcome in the classical textbook sense. So what does that do to disprove evolution? What it does is it demonstrates that natural selection does not put the energy back in. As mass increases, as time continues, because the way the equation is structured, when energy increases, entropy increases. When entropy increases, randomization of the system increases. And so this goes back to the idea of the very subjective idea of what is order. To an evolutionist, a whole bunch of different variations on genomic sequence can all be order. But what we know about actual real life mutations is they disrupt the order. They do not improve it. That's why we have this great big giant database of diseases and dysfunctions. So yeah, you're using a non-energy source to try and solve a problem that has to be solved with energy.
All right, gentlemen, thank you so much. Next question comes in from Slam RN. So thank you so much, Slam RN. Question for Luca Medugno. So she asks, how is the second law of thermodynamics not applicable to genetic entropy? You asked for it. So she's coming at you, Luca. Go ahead.
Yes. So wonderful. Where the energy come from? Well, you are eating, so you are producing ATPs, so you have energy, and energy can reverse entropy. I worked on these things, so yeah. Evolution and even evolutionism has no problem at all with entropy. No problem at all. Also, I've seen a lot of problem into TRock's presentation, like negative sign. I do not know why it was there. Of course, entropy can be negative or positive. Change in the formulas depends, of course. It's negative if you look into Free Gibbs formula, but we are not talking about that, so no sign there. And yeah, it's not applicable. It's applicable only on isolated system like the universe. If you are open, you can get energy like food, like the sun, and you can and will, in this case, reverse entropy for some time. Then you die. Please.
Thank you so much, Luca, for your answer to Slam RN's good question. TRock, over to you.
Okay, so props for at least acknowledging that it takes energy, not natural selection, to decrease the entropy. But there's still a major problem with Luca's argument. Number one, it's extremely hand-wavy and generalized. When you eat or drink, rule number one, your mass increases. What does the formula for entropy say? When your mass increases and your temperature stays pretty much the same, your entropy increases with it. So you did not decrease entropy at all. Second of all, your food source. Now, if you've ever gotten a chemical analysis from your local water company, they'll tell you how many, parts per million mercury, how many parts per million lead, magnesium, manganese, zinc, whatever is in your water. And then you look at it and go, oh man, I'm drinking toxic chemicals. Well, you got to stop and think about that for a minute, because in evolutionary theory, of course, there was no water company for 3 billion years. Instead, the animals went out and drank the dirty water in the river. You want to do a chemical analysis on that and tell me which one's more healthy for you. The point is that your food source can absolutely induce more entropy by reason of the chemicals in it, as well as increasing your mass, and thereby, by the simple equation, S equals Q over T, your mass increased, your entropy increased with it. But I think there was one other point that I wanted to make out of that, and I just don't remember it off the top of my head. But anyway, all you're demonstrating is that you're using the energy the wrong way, and you're not accounting for the fact that it still doesn't work in the equation.
Yes, I can respond now.
Oh yeah, you get the last word.
Yes. I have a very good question for TRock, and I want to ask it. So let's pretend that you have a perfect crystal at 0 degree Kelvin. It's 1 ton, 2 tons, 1 million tons, whatever you want. How much entropy do you have?
Well, it's undefined because you're dividing by 0.
No, you have 0 entropy.
Okay, but in pure mathematical terms, you can't divide by 0.
No. In pure mathematical terms, you will have 0 entropy.
No.
Yes.
That's not how we define anything divided by 0 is undefined. I'm not sure what point you're making out of that, though, because
that entropy is not related to mass. You can have whatever mass you want. If you have perfect crystal, you will have no entropy, for definition.
Well,
and that's the third law of thermodynamics.
Actually, that's not true because, well, in your,
it's not true.
Let me clarify. That's not exactly what I mean. In your example, because T is 0, the energy of the crystal of whatever size is 0. So both terms are 0. Mathematically, still, we say undefined. We do not say 0 divided by 0 equals 0. We say anything divided by 0 is undefined. But I'm not sure what point you're making out of that, because for entropy to decrease, you've got two options. If temperature is constant, mass needs to decrease. Or if temperature is not constant, mass needs to stay relatively constant and temperature needs to go up. That's how you decrease entropy.
If you have something that is transitioning from a gas to a solid, and it's possible, entropy is increasing or decreasing?
Well, again, if the temperature is decreasing, the entropy is increasing.
No. Sorry.
How
entropy works. And also, whatever quantity of a perfect crystal at 0 degree Kelvin, you will have 0 entropy. And that's for definition. That's the third law of thermodynamics.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, TRock, I did not intervene on your presentation earlier, but there were some very grave mistakes. And I can understand it's not your field.
Are you going to relate that to biology in some way?
Well, yes, we are talking about entropy, so we are talking about entropy.
So you have a biological system with 0 degree Kelvin?
Sorry?
So you have a biological system with 0 degree Kelvin?
No, it's impossible to do so.
That's my point. Relate your example to biology.
It's not related to biology, TRock, but it was a question to make you understand that you are out of your depth. It's not related to biology. It's related to entropy. And you are getting that wrong.
So you're telling me if a person that weighs 200 pounds at 98 degrees Fahrenheit has the same entropy as a person that weighs 100 pounds at the same temperature?
Depends.
They literally have the same thermal energy per unit of measure.
The entropy is the amount of work that a system can still do. So how can you tell that about a person?
That is not what entropy is. Entropy is the
energy
that did not get used for work.
Yeah. the quantity of work that the system can still do.
No, that's not what entropy is. It's not the quantity of work that a system can still do. It's the quantity of work that did not, it's the quantity of energy that did not get used for work or could not be.
Energy
It's unavailable for work.
Constant. Energy is constant. It's not like it's changing. Energy is still there.
No, you're not going to possibly convince me that a 200-pound person has the same amount of internal energy as a 100-pound person. They don't.
I'm not talking about. It's a different thing. The quantity of energy is constant, always, inside an isolated system, of course. But we are not talking about that.
All right, we'll give Luca the last response there since it was his question. Great back and forth, round two during the audience Q&A. So next question comes in from Tom K. Question for you, Luca. If mutations don't build up over time, how is evolution possible? Go ahead, Luca.
Yeah, it will be not possible to have evolution. And I think that I have good evidence for that. I will go through some in the next debate. So let's find out together.
All right. Go ahead, TRock.
Yeah, that's the major conundrum behind the whole thing is, yes, mutations do accumulate. The question is, are they deleterious? Is the accumulation deleterious leaning, or is it beneficial leaning? Or is there a mechanism that can remove the deleterious mutations? So I guess in both worldviews, whether you're a young Earth creationist or an evolutionist, yes, mutations do build up over time. But the central question is the long-term effect an increase in or a decrease in fitness, increase in deleterious effect? And the answer is yes, it always is. We've given a number of indicators. Diseases in the population, pretty much everywhere you look, you can find evidences of deleterious mutations increasing. So age and I apologize, age wasn't really Luca's focus. Size has nothing whatsoever to do with the buildup of mutations anyway.
Luca,
you get the last word. Question was for you.
Yes, I think that's a good question, but that's my point. If I can show that evolution is indeed a thing, that means that the hypothesis of genetic entropy does not work, of course. So it will be the focus of the next debate, in particular on mutations, because we have more evidence than that, but it will be something nonetheless. So let's tune in the 5th of August to find out.
All right, appreciate it. And I think one or two more questions. So I think we're going to make it to the end of the debate at the 2.5 hour mark. So again, TRock and Luca, thank you so much for your time. Michael he asked, question for debaters. So question for the both of you. When discussing entropy, it can be attributed to more than just genetic copying errors. Example, solar radiation and exposure to harmful things like that. Question mark. So I guess he's wondering if it can apply to other things other than the genome. So I think the last time we had a question for the both of you, TRock started. So Luca, we can have you, or no, wait, I think it was actually you, Luca. So we can have TRock.
I would say that yes, it can. If you are irradiated by radiation and things like that, you can have a problem with your descendants too. So I would not call it genetic entropy, but of course you can pass on those kind of mutation. Yes.
All right, and over to you, TRock.
Yes, actually, this is a very good point. It's one that I actually highlighted in my opening, that there are a number of external factors that are what's the word I'm looking for? They're hostile to life, as described here, solar radiation, that sort of thing. It's pretty much all about those chemical bonds, because even the food supply can import things like that. It's not enough just to put energy back into the system. That is not enough. I find that extremely hand wavy of evolutionists to say, oh, entropy can decrease because you put energy back into the system. Well, the reality is you've got energy coming from a lot of different directions. It's not enough to put energy into the system. It has to be intelligently directed. It's not different than a car. Your car would undergo very rapid entropic decay if it weren't for you performing maintenance on it. And so you can, and even if you put gas in the gas tank, instead of, spraying it into the seat and lighting it on fire, you put it into the proper channel, and it still increases the entropy in the system and causes it to break down over time. You have to have much more than just saying, oh, we put energy back, therefore we have a mechanism to decrease entropy. You don't. You've got energy coming from too many directions, unchanneled, and not doing the very thing it's supposed to do, which is reorder the system.
All right. Thank you, gentlemen. You're doing a fantastic job in this audience Q&A. We've had a lot of great questions. So here we go. We're going to end it here with C Science Film Labs. Question for you, Luca. C Science is coming at you. So he's asking, do atheists really believe that a language as ordered and complex as the language we observe within the human genome can come about by chance and chance alone?
Yes, but I will not call it just chance, because if you look see science, and nice to see you, we talk always in chat. So if you look at the first languages, scripture in particular, if you look into hieroglyphics, you will see that you will start with images correlated to sounds, and then things will get more time pass, more complex. And we see speech patterns even in animals, like in some monkeys. So yeah, I can see language originating by natural means. Yes.
Thank you, Luca. TRock, any thoughts, anything you'd like to add, brother?
Yeah, Lucas made a really bad example, calling on pictures transforming over time into complex symbols and that sort of thing. Actually, if you've ever looked at the what's it called, the Rosetta Stone, those languages are highly advanced. They're much more advanced than modern languages. They used them both as pictographic languages, numeric system, and written audio, verbal speech. It represented a number of functions. Today, we've basically broken that all apart and tried to simplify it. But the very first examples of written languages were highly complex, and it took years and years before somebody could finally crack the code because it was too complex. And so I find it very hand wavy to say, oh, there used to be pictures and then there was language. The reality is that if you look at like the caves in France, they're attributed to some 30,000 years ago, and you find these very detailed drawings in there. There is no written language with them, sure enough, but the evolutionists basically have said, oh, there must be an idiot savant, or I guess that's a bad term. They would just use the word savant as in like some kind of genius in every population that somehow managed to do this. But there is literally no correlation between a drawing in a cave and how language develops. There's no way to discern that. The language could have existed simultaneously and you wouldn't know it.
TRock, appreciate the response. Luca, question was for
yes,
you.
I think I was misunderstood on that. My point was that the process was similar. If you look at those languages, you will start with things, basically drawings. And when you go forward, you will have more stereotyped symbols. Basically, you will have symbols more different than what you are depicting. With the language, it was, I can figure out, not figure out, I can say that was something similar. You will use verse, a rumor, I don't know, something to depict something. And over generation, those sounds will become more articulate. So there is those monkeys that can use different screams to say that there is a predator behind or above on trees, and those are just sounds. But you can extrapolate that process to have something that resembles a language. That's just a language if you think about it. Of course, we are smarter than monkeys, so we can go a step further and do more complex things.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Luca. Gentlemen, we made it to the end of the debate. Opening statement, rebuttals, open discussion. You guys had a fantastic discussion. Very technical debate, but an important debate. Again, what we debated tonight is genetic entropy, a legitimate problem for evolution. So please share this around. The truth is important. Critical thinking is important, which is exactly why we host so many debates on so many important topics. So again, Luca, TRock, thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for giving us your time for this debate. Some final words, final thoughts. Why don't we start with you, Luca? Again, thank you for doing this. Over to you.
Yes, it was a pleasure to be here. I hope that TRock has no ill thoughts of me because our previous exchange on entropy. I am very passionate about that topic, and if I got something wrong, I will be notified by my side, almost for sure. So it was a pleasure. I hope that was the same for TRock, and thank you all to be here.
Awesome. Thank you, Luca. TRock, over to you. Final thoughts, final words, and thank you for doing this debate.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you to the audience for showing up and participating. Some really good questions came out of that, as always. Thank you, Luca, for participating in the discussion. I had a lot of fun with it. I think there's a lot more ground to cover, though, and it definitely warrants an extension of the conversation, whether it's between me and you or whoever, but there's so much to cover on this subject. But I think I was fairly happy with the way the overall conversation went. Thank you to Donnie for hosting and putting forth the effort to coordinate this event. And again, my intent is always not to win the debate, but to show that young Earth creation position is extremely reasonable, extremely consistent with application science, not just theoretical science. And so with that, I always invite people like Luca to really get into the application, not the generalization of it. But thank you, guys.
Appreciate the final words and final thoughts. TRock and Luca. Again, another debate for the books. So anybody new to the channel and they're interested in debates like we are, they're debate addicts, please check the playlist titled Debates hosted by Standing for Truth. You'll find over 200 debates on all sorts of topics. So we'll see you again this week. Thursday, we've got a show on the rapture. Next day, we've got a debate on the King James only controversy, then a debate on Old Testament salvation, and we'll kick kick off next week with another debate on evolutionary theory. Again, TRock, Luca, thank you so much. To the audience, thank you for joining. Thank you for the questions and support. Standing for Truth is out. God bless.